Thanks, Dan. So he says he invites me every year. I can't remember the last one, but anyway. I think I've stood on this stage a few times to say a few things. I can't remember what the last audience was, but it's a real pleasure to come to Tech UK. And it's great to work with Dan. He is a fantastic partner in Tech UK, and their side show Tech Skills. Tech Skills is fantastically useful partner for us to deliver so many of our policies. So we work very closely. And I'm delighted that I managed to get in here earlier to see a few of the pictures. It's always interesting as a policymaker trying to understand what on earth it is that's being described. And when you get it, you feel like, yes, I've finally earned my spurs. I was going to say a few things about what we're doing in DSIT at the moment. That's the new department responsible for cyber policy. We took on the role from a combination of Cabinet Office, BEIS, and DCMS earlier this year. I was going to start with skills, a few words on skills, and I think partly because I feel like in the last few weeks we've actually done something great. And it's the intractable problem, cyber skills. We talk about it all the time, and we always sort of wonder whether actually we've achieved anything and made any progress. But we've spent the last several years going around saying that one of the key challenges is that we don't have standards, we don't have a professional body, and the problem with lacking this kind of architecture to the cyber workforce and the UK cyber sector means that it's very hard for organizations to be able to know what skills they need in their organization. It's very hard for employees to understand how they get onto the ladder and how they work their way through the cyber system. And it also means that we are at a loss compared to other sectors of the economy and the education system. Where there are more established professions and professional bodies, it's easier to see. So I'm starting with this because having talked about this problem ad nauseum for several years, last week the UK Cybersecurity Council, the new professional body, well, not new anymore, they've been around since 2021, but they have now finally set standards across 4 specialisms. They have in place the arrangements with those licensed bodies to be able to assess people in the workforce, give them status up to chartered status. And they had an event last week where the first 100 people who've achieved this were recognized. So that's a really important step in trying to professionalize the cyber workforce. And of course, now the council looks to government as the essential next step to try to make this actually stick. So we have to make sure that in the UK economy there is demand for this. We're talking to regulators. Last week we spoke with Ofcom, Ofgem, Bank of England, Financial Conduct Authority, Office of Nuclear Regulation, probably a couple of others I can't remember off the top of my head, and discussed how it is that they're going to embed those professional standards into the frameworks by which they assess and regulate people in the cyber sector. So that's great. We need to do more of that. Next week we are in Singapore Cyber Week, but we're talking to lots of governments there about how do we ensure we have interoperability on these standards globally, which is absolutely a critical component as well if we want this stuff to stick. So that's the sort of core thing on skills. We do a whole load of other stuff on skills too. Of course, we have our program in schools. Biggest program is Cyber Explorers, a schools program for 11 to 14-year-olds. We have 56,000 students, I think, enrolled on that program now. So that's reaching a reasonable critical mass. So that's a helpful intervention to try to get more young people interested in this area. And we've been continuing to run our boot camps. Our current boot camp called Upskill in Cyber only had 300 spaces on it, and it got something like 5,000–6,000 applications a few months ago. So there's clearly lots of demand for this. On the rest of the trying to grow the sector, we're obviously delighted that the sector has grown every year since we've measured it. Growth was a little slower than normally measured last year, but that's kind of a reflection of the the wider economy, but also a reminder of the challenges that we all have to try to support and try and unblock the barriers to growth that we see in this sector. But we have over £10.5 billion of revenue, 2,000 firms, so that is reasonably healthy. What do we do in DCIT to try to support this? We have the Cyber Runway program, which is an accelerator for companies at different stages. 215 cyber companies have been through Cyber Runway so far. And we are very proud of some of the successes from there. SiteHop is listed here as having raised £1 million in funding early this year. So that's excellent news and builds upon other programs we've run in the past, including Lorca. I was chatting to somebody just at the break there about their involvement in that program going back a couple of years now. We also do a whole load of other interventions to try to support the cyber ecosystem around the country and to grow it, of course, in those particular places in the UK which are really special for cyber, like the West Country, Cheltenham, Belfast, Preston, and the home of the Cyber Force, but also all the other areas and our partners in Manchester as well. So growing the cyber sector, a really key thing. I thought finally I'd say a few words about AI, because of course, how can you not say anything about AI, particularly when of course all the earlier pictures talked only about AI. And if I go and talk to one of my ministers at the moment, all they want to talk about is AI too. So we have the summit coming up. It's only a few days away, actually. I think probably 2 weeks or something till the summit. And at that summit, we are trying to focus it on a discussion around the safety of AI. But of course, safe AI is only safe if it's underpinned by secure systems. Cybersecurity of AI is going to be very much part of the discussions as well. We are working with our colleagues at the National Cyber Security Centre and with our colleagues in the partner agencies globally to establish what we think are the right principles and standards for secure AI. And we are going to be trying to get a greater international consensus around these as one of the objectives for the summit in a couple of weeks' time. Now, of course, we always hear about this coming from government about, oh, the dangers of AI and all the horrible things that is going to happen and how these rules are going to save us from all being callously murdered by an out-of-control AI. But actually, I think in a lot of the discussions that we've been having recently with industry, what we are trying to do on AI is also going to be a huge enabler of growth and innovation if we can get this right. We were talking to some folks earlier in the week about how regulators in plenty of areas basically just don't allow this kind of technology in the door where there is safety critical systems in operation. And there are other areas too where there is concern and worry. And of course, there are also within this community lots of people who have been working with AI to try to make it safe, but haven't yet managed to actually find the confidence and momentum in the economy to really be able to push this innovation as successfully or into areas where they have found the doors closed so far. So we really believe that if we can create a framework for safe AI, if we can have internationally mutually agreed mechanism to build trust in these technologies, that opens all sorts of doors for growth and innovation in the UK cyber sector and beyond. So the focus on AI really needs to be seen as not just the bad stuff, not just all the nice little glossy stories as well, but actually trying to embed this technology into the UK economy in a way where it's trusted and secure. And that's why we're doing the summit, and that's why we're really looking forward to continuing all of our dialogue with the sector, including yourselves, over the coming weeks and months. Dan, I think you wanted to ask me some questions.
Yeah. So I ask Andrew questions, so that's rather the audience asking those questions. But I've got a few that we can start off with. But anyone online or in the room who wants to ask the first question? That gentleman there. Oh, sorry. I think the gentleman behind were asking a question.
Hi, Andrew. My name is Kitty Hung. I work in Atkins. I think you're the most appropriate person to answer my question because you are a government representative. What is your view on geopolitics in the world that is out of the control of EU or NATO? You find the bad actors, but there's no international jurisdiction to punish them or to take them to court of justice. How do you overcome this?
Well, there isn't a straightforward answer to that, but we have lots of different partnerships and relationships with our international partners to try to handle this kind of thing. We call out more and more where we see this kind of activity happening, naming it, being clear and transparent as to what's going on. It's really important. We work with our international partners to try to respond and secure against these threats and share intelligence and make sure that we commonly know what's going on, and we share that with industry. And there's good dialogue and transparency around that as well. And then, of course, we have our own capabilities to go and tackle these things. You will have seen last year we published, was it early this year? I think we published the National Cyber Forces. Can't recall what they call the document. They said they published a document setting out the framework in which they will use cyber capabilities in a proportionate and managed way to handle those threats outside our jurisdiction where there are no alternative sanctions available. So there isn't a straightforward answer to your question, but there are a number of levers, and if we pull them in the right way, I think we can manage the risk better.
That gentleman there, and then the gentleman in the second row from the back.
Do you have any view on how we could actually make these international norms actually survive more than a few years into conference? I'm just thinking, if I was sitting in Tel Aviv or Kiev today, thinking about which technologies I should or should not use, I really wouldn't be paying much attention to international norms, and both Ukraine and Israel are world leaders in technology, perhaps Ukraine rather less than Israel. How do we not end up with a situation where nations like ourselves have lots of stringent, well-meaning rules, and that nations that do not share our values or fear that there are more pressing problems decide that the rules are running for us? And history has been very unkind to societies that haven't adopted new technologies, even if they were a bit ugly.
Well, I don't think the world is quite as miserable as you set out. And the work that we do does try to tackle these things. I mean, part of the problem we've had is that we haven't engaged constructively enough in the last few years, and until more recently, in the international standards bodies and the respective forums where these things are discussed, and we have left it too much in the hands of countries that are not like-minded to lead some of these discussions. So we're putting that right, and we are much more on the front foot in this. There are on AI, there are discussions going on in CENELEC, whatever the international one's called, ISO, and ETSI at the moment, and they are all being led by like-minded states, and we are much more on the front foot there. I think that the other issue we have is that in the past we have perhaps just set too many woolly principles, which have not meant quite the right thing, or they mean different things to different people. And while that may be well-intentioned and designed to be able to sort of provide flexibility and not cause market disruption, I think it hasn't always been helpful. So we are looking at how we can do that better as well. That requires more work with industry and more consultation. but again, challenges there. But I think we are getting better at that.
Just to pick up on that question as well from a kind of wider cyber context. I know the question was specifically about AI, but the FCO are also doing some work with RUSI looking at those challenges around dual use cyber technologies, and that's something that industry and some of the members that are in this room are involved in. So more widely as well, we're looking at those in Tech UK. The gentleman just second row at the back.
I am. You mentioned the restructuring of the new cyber security professional certifications. What do you think the new structure will add that the previous one didn't? And what value do you think it'll have above already existing certifications like CISM, CISP, etc.? And yeah, I'll finish there.
So we do an annual survey of the cyber labour market, which we publish, and in it you can see what are the most sought after certifications, and there are one or two like CISP which basically have total dominance of the market. Does this mean that all organizations have a requirement for the CISP certification to make themselves more resilient or perform the tasks that they think they need, or is it just simply that the HR department Googled what would be the appropriate thing and that was the obvious one? Or I don't think it's a market which really understands what it needs, dares he say, as a public servant. We work closely with our colleagues across government to try to understand where the kind of threats are and how the economy is positioned to respond to them. And we have concluded that we don't think that a lot of organizations necessarily have the skills that they require to be able to look after themselves. And in fact, industry has said the same. In our labour market survey, 70% or something of organizations said that they lack the specialist requirements that they need. So CISP and the like have a place, but unfortunately, in the lack of a good framework that people can understand and work with, they've become the default. So we're hoping that can be addressed. How things like CISP map in, and whether that, whether the people with these existing certifications are able to sort of see how they fit within the bigger framework, that hasn't quite been completed yet, but that's very much an important stage so that we can see what the sort of transition looks like for the cyber workforce from now into where we hope to get to.
I think there's a question here from Dave and then that gentleman there.
Will it work off this microphone?
No.
No. Yeah, you mentioned the AI summit that's coming up, and obviously the AI task force is a really big part of that. And for those not aware, it's doing amazing work. I've never seen government work like it before. Long term, strategically, what's the AI task force's objectives? Where is it going to fit in amongst the UK cybersecurity community and what exists already?
I think that is really what the summit's for. That will be the key deliverable from the summit. We have ambition for the AI task force to have a clearer role as a key sort of part of the international infrastructure to address the challenges that we see with AI. And I think that the discussion that we have at Bletchley will focus around that. And I would hope that, and I don't really want to say much more than that. I think wait till the 2nd of November, and we will hopefully achieve a consensus that can give you a much clearer picture of where that will land. But to say more now, I think, would be to deny the opportunity for the full discussion to happen.
Gentleman there.
Thank you. Hello, Andrew. I'm Mark Cook from IBM. I was wondering, does Daresbury come under your remit? Because I heard some of the fantastic work we're doing there, the accelerated technology labs, and bringing industry in to work with the scientists and the technicians there, looking at quantum and obviously AI and where it can go in the future, and solving proper business issues that are here currently.
Well, I'm sure my department has something to do with that, but it's not me.
Can I just ask a linked question to that, actually? So Tech UK were really encouraged when DCIT were formed from DCMS and putting all the science and technology in one place, and we were really supportive of that move. Have you seen your team's work become closer to the teams that are working on quantum or on AI? Is that starting to come through now, or is it still a bit of a work in progress?
Well, I would say we worked reasonably close on those things beforehand, but there's definitely a benefit of having us all under the same roof. Quantum, AI are both in our list of priority technologies. We are working on the security of all of them. The roadmap on all of them is a little bit different, I think, but the relationship is very close. I mean, on AI, we have about 25 people, I think, from the cyber part of our organization embedded in there at the moment and providing advice on AI security.
Got time for one more question, and I've got one to finish with. Anyone with a final question from the floor? Gentleman on the end there.
Hey, Andrew, my name is Michael. I'm with Hayes Technology, and I actually manage our cybersecurity practice across the London public sector and work closely with a lot of the clients that you mentioned earlier on in your presentation. One thing we're seeing from a skills perspective is a lot of the clients are saying that, you know, they're understaffed, they don't have people who can come in and do what they need to do, but then they're a tad more resistant when it comes to upskilling or doing boot camps or programs in order to attract and entertain that talent in the long run. What would be your advice to some of these individuals or organizations that are more resistant to that approach, as opposed to only being interested in talent that can come in and hit the ground running?
Well, there are some very successful stories of people who have managed to successfully upskill their staff or participate in boot camp. And they should go and talk to them, and they should learn from them. You've got to be careful who you go and talk to, though, because there's always been plenty of boot camp programs that have been a complete flop. So you have to pick and choose. It is. I had a really interesting discussion with a large training provider who run boot camps, and you know, there is a sort of model for how the Department for Education bootcamp program works, where you can go and talk to them, and if you can demonstrate that you have enough businesses who are able to support you, and then you work out what the curriculum is, and you can pull together a bootcamp that meets a specific industry need. And it all sounds great, but actually in the implementation of it, you actually have to construct that without really having the bootcamp training provider in the lead, or their commercial motivations tend to, I think, take the thing off in slightly the wrong direction sometimes. And the better examples we've seen is where actually you have typically organized by a sort of geographically local group of cyber companies, or led by a cyber cluster, where they've put together a boot camp which has been they have been clear on what they need their staff to know. They have been clear on what their actual requirements are, and then the actual curriculum building and the training provider have come later, and they have managed to construct these things. There are also boot camps which are, you know, the 12-week boot camps, or you go for like a sort of longer thing, 6-month camps, and you can see huge differences in them. But there are some really great examples. My favorite boot camp at the moment is one that we are partially funding. We do it 50-50 funding, which is in Bradford. There's a program called Cyber Ready, which we run with CompTIA, and it's very small. We only do cohorts of about 20 to 30, but the conversion rate to employment is nearly 100%. And the remaining in the industry 2 years later, I think we've been going for long enough to be able to measure that, is really high. I don't know the exact figure, but it's, there are 1 or 2 who've dropped out, and the income is really high as well. So that's a good example. If I could then go and look at some of the other boot camps, and the data is poor. So yeah, you find them.
Final question from me. We've had a cybersecurity strategy for almost 15 years, and we hosted a session with Cabinet Office a few weeks ago, looking at their annual progress report. We'll ask you about all the strategy and the bits under that, but in terms of the bits that DCIT are responsible for, so primarily pillar 1 that we spending most of the time talking about today, we see loads of world leading inventions like the Council or like PSTI, or things where the UK is doing things first. I wonder if there's an area where you think we've not been quick enough, or something that is the next thing on your list. Once the council's up and running and it's chartering people every week, what's the next thing that DCIT wants to look at?
Okay, well, I'll tell you what I'm most frustrated about is we consulted not so long ago about the future of the NIS regulations, which are the regulations which set the sort of framework for security requirements in critical national infrastructure. And we said that we would like to extend them to managed service providers, and that has become sort of an increasingly critical gap in, I think, our regulatory framework for cybersecurity. Now, of course, if I look internationally, nobody's really quite nailed this area yet either. Lots of talk about it, but I think we set out in that consultation a good model for how we want to go about closing that gap, but we've yet to do so. I think that's our biggest weakness at the moment, and I'd like to make much more progress on that front. But things like PSTI have been really great first step. But again, it's very much a first step. PSTI is the regulatory requirements for consumer IoT, but we've started with a small step there. We've only set relatively easy to meet security requirements, despite what your members tell me. And we would like to ramp that up in due course, obviously with full consultation and adequate notice to all of your partners.
Absolutely. Thanks, Andrew, for joining us today. I really appreciate the engagement.